She gave up her ticket for a tired father with a child, not knowing he was a millionaire CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of rolling suitcases echoed through the crowded terminal of John F. Kennedy Airport. The overhead lights glowed a tired gold, reflecting off polished floors slick with melted snow. It was the evening before Christmas, and every gate was filled with anxious faces, people clutching tickets and coffee cups, desperate to get home. Among them stood Ella Moore, 27 years old, a travel agent who had just lost her job that morning. Her shoulders drooped under the weight of a second-hand duffel bag. She had one ticket, one chance to get home to Chicago to see her mother, who had been sick for weeks. Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. She is stable for now. Ella exhaled slowly, whispering a silent prayer that she could make it in time. A child's cry pierced the air near the gate. Ella turned. A man about her age stood a few feet away, holding a little girl who clung to his coat. He looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. "I am sorry, sir," the airline clerk said. "The flight is full. We cannot accommodate you or your daughter." His voice was quiet when he answered, "Please, she needs to be home for Christmas." Ella hesitated. She looked at her boarding pass, then at the man's trembling hands as he rocked his child. Something in her chest tightened. She stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Take my seat. You need it more than I do." "Oh." The clerk blinked, surprised. The man turned to her, stunned. "Miss, you do not have to do that." Ella smiled faintly. "It is all right. My mom always says kindness travels faster than any plane." She held out her ticket. The man's eyes glistened. "At least let me pay you back. Consider it a Christmas gift," she said. He nodded slowly, speechless, and took the boarding pass. As he handed over his identification, Ella caught a glimpse of the name printed there, Daniel Reed. She thought it sounded familiar, but the announcement for boarding drowned out her thought. The little girl reached out a tiny hand. "Thank you, lady." Ella crouched down and smiled. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Minutes later, she watched the plane roll down the icy runway, its lights blinking through the snow until it disappeared into the night sky. The terminal grew quiet again. Just the faint buzz of vending machines and the weary sighs of those still stranded. Ella sank into a plastic chair by the window, pulling her coat tight. The warmth from the coffee cup in her hands could not chase away the chill that settled deep inside her. She stared at the empty gate, wondering if she had been foolish or brave. Outside, the snow thickened, painting the tarmac in white silence. Her reflection in the glass looked small but calm. A woman who had lost everything that day yet still gave something away. "Hope you make it home," she murmured, tracing the words with her finger on the fogged window pane. Somewhere high above the clouds, on that same plane, Daniel Reed sat with his sleeping daughter against his shoulder. He looked down at the ticket in his hand and saw Ella's handwriting on the back. "Hope you make it home." For the first time in years, the hardened businessman felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Gratitude. He whispered into the dark cabin, "I will." The next morning, the storm had swallowed the city whole. Snow covered every taxi roof and blanketed the runways in silence. Inside the airport, the announcements repeated in a tired voice, listing delays and cancellations that never seemed to end. Ella Moore rubbed her frozen hands together, still wearing the same coat from the night before. Her hair was tangled from sleeping upright in the plastic chair near Gate 32. Her body ached, but it was her heart that felt heavier. Her phone battery had died hours ago. The last message she saw was from the hospital in Chicago. "Your mother is asking when you will arrive." The words sat like a stone in her chest. She had no idea how long the storm would last or when she would get another seat. Around her, travelers groaned, children cried, and an elderly couple shared the last sandwich from a vending machine. A kind woman from the cleaning crew passed by and offered her a cup of hot chocolate. "You look like you could use this," she said. Ella smiled faintly, grateful for the warmth. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The woman nodded and moved on, leaving a faint scent of cinnamon behind. Ella pulled her sketchbook from her bag. The pages were creased, the corners bent, but drawing had always calmed her nerves. She began to sketch the little girl she had seen last night, the one clinging to her father's coat. She drew the tired man's eyes, the kind that carried both strength and exhaustion. When she finished, she wrote 2 words under the picture: safe flight. Hours passed. The snow kept falling, soft and relentless. A television in the corner played the morning news. Ella glanced up, barely paying attention, until she noticed a familiar logo on the screen: Aurelian Group. The anchor spoke of a charity flight arranged overnight to help stranded passengers reach their families before Christmas. The company's CEO had personally covered the cost. The footage showed silhouettes boarding a private jet through the snow, one of them a tall man carrying a child in a pink coat. Ella froze. The little girl turned toward the camera for a brief second, those same wide, curious eyes. Her heart thudded. Could it be the same father and daughter from last night? She leaned closer, but the image flickered and cut to commercials. She shook her head, laughing quietly at herself. "Do not be ridiculous, Ella," she murmured. "Not every tired dad with a kid is a miracle." Still, the thought lingered, warming a corner of her heart. By late afternoon, the storm began to ease. Sunlight glimmered through the windows, painting streaks of gold over the snow. Passengers stretched and yawned, and airport staff started calling new flight numbers. Ella approached the counter, her duffel bag slung across one shoulder. "Excuse me. Are there any standby seats to Chicago tonight?" The attendant smiled apologetically. "I am afraid everything is still full until tomorrow morning." Ella nodded. "All right, thank you." Her voice stayed calm, even though disappointment pricked behind her eyes. She walked back to the same window seat she had claimed the night before. Outside, a plane lifted into the sky, wings slicing through the clouds. A soft laugh escaped her. "I hope you made it home," she whispered, thinking of the man and his daughter. Then she added, almost under her breath, "Maybe kindness really does travel faster than any plane." As evening settled again over the airport, Ella rested her head against the cold glass. The hum of engines and the steady rhythm of footsteps blended into a lullaby. In her sketchbook, the drawing of the man and his child waited like a promise. What she did not know was that, somewhere far above the clouds, Daniel Reed was still awake. His daughter slept soundly beside him, and in his hand he held the boarding pass with her handwriting. The words glowed faintly in the cabin light. "Hope you make it home." He smiled to himself, whispering, "You have no idea, Miss Moore. But I will find a way to thank you." And with that, the plane continued east, chasing the sunrise across the frozen sky. The storm passed by morning, leaving New York wrapped in quiet sunlight and thick drifts of white snow. Inside the terminal, Ella Moore stretched her stiff legs and packed her sketchbook back into her worn duffel bag. Her flight was finally rescheduled for later that afternoon. She was exhausted but grateful. One night stranded in an airport was nothing compared to the relief of finally going home. She called the hospital the moment her phone had enough charge. "She is resting," the nurse said kindly. "Your mother keeps asking when you will arrive." Ella's throat tightened. "Please tell her soon. I will be there today." She hung up, pressing the phone to her chest for a moment of silent hope. Hours later, she boarded the small connecting flight to Chicago. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel. Passengers murmured softly as snow glittered outside the window. Ella opened her sketchbook again, tracing the drawing of the man and his child. She smiled faintly at the memory. To her, it was just a simple act of kindness, something any decent person would do. But somewhere deep inside, that brief encounter still glowed like a candle she could not forget. When the plane touched down, she hurried through the arrival's gate. Her younger sister, June, met her with a tight hug. "Mom is stable, but she will be happy to see you." The hospital was only a few miles away. Snowflakes clung to Ella's hair as they stepped outside, their breath visible in the cold air. At St. Mary's Hospital, Ella sat beside her mother's bed, holding her frail hand. Machines hummed softly in the background. "You look tired," her mother said, smiling weakly. "I slept at the airport," Ella admitted. Her mother's eyes widened. "Why on earth would you do that?" "I gave up my seat to a man with a little girl," Ella said with a small laugh. They needed it more than I did. Oh. Her mother squeezed her hand gently. That sounds like something you would do. I raised you right. For a few days, the world slowed down. Ella stayed by her mother's side, reading aloud from her favorite books, helping the nurses with small things. But soon, reality returned. Her temporary job contract had ended. Her rent notice sat unopened in her bag. She needed to find work fast. One morning, while scrolling through listings at the hospital cafe, she noticed a post that caught her eye. Aurelian Group, marketing assistant, entry level. She frowned slightly. The name sounded familiar, but she could not place it. Maybe she had seen it on television during the airport broadcast. Either way, she needed the income. She sent her resume that afternoon, typing carefully on the hospital computer. 3 days later, an email arrived. We would like to invite you for an interview at our downtown office this Friday. The day of the interview arrived bright and cold. Ella wore her cleanest blouse and borrowed her sister's gray coat. The lobby of Aurelian Group gleamed with marble floors and glass walls that reached the ceiling. She hesitated before stepping up to the front desk. I have an interview with Human Resources, she said softly. The receptionist smiled. Elevator to the 22nd floor, ma'am. Ella pressed the elevator button and watched the numbers climb. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked small but determined. You have got this, she whispered. When the doors slid open, she nearly collided with someone stepping out. Papers spilled across the floor. I am so sorry, she blurted out, crouching to help gather them. A deep voice answered, calm and familiar. No harm done. She froze. That voice. She looked up. The man in front of her wore a dark suit, his hair neatly combed, his expression surprised yet warm. It was him, the tired father from the airport. For a moment, the world around her went silent, the clicking heels, the phones, the hum of office chatter all gone. Only his quiet smile remained. You, she whispered. From the airport. He nodded slowly. I was hoping I would see you again. Ella blinked, still crouched, still holding a stack of papers. You were hoping to see me? Yes, he said, extending a hand to help her up. I never got to thank you properly. She took his hand, still dazed. You do not need to. I was happy to help. The elevator chimed behind them, breaking the silence. He smiled again, gentle but unreadable. Well, I am glad you are here. Welcome to Aurelian Group, Miss Moore. Her heart stumbled in her chest. You work here? His answer was simple. Something like that. Oh. As he walked away, his assistant rushed up, whispering, Mr. Reed, the board is waiting. Ella stood frozen, her thoughts spinning. Mr. Reed? The name echoed through her mind like a distant bell. Daniel Reed. The same name printed on the boarding pass she had handed over that night. She clutched her sketchbook tighter, a strange mix of confusion and wonder stirring inside her. What were the odds that the man she helped at the airport was now standing here, in this building, at the very company that had just invited her to start again? Fate, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of timing. Ella Moore spent the first week at Aurelian Group trying to convince herself that the man she had met in the elevator was just a coincidence. She told herself that it could not be the same person, that Daniel Reed was a common name, that the world was not that small. But every time she passed the conference floor and heard his calm, steady voice through the glass walls, her heart reminded her otherwise. Her role was simple. She assisted the marketing team with the company's new holiday campaign. It was called One Ticket Home, a project aimed at reuniting families separated by travel delays during the Christmas storm. The theme made her smile. It felt strangely familiar, as if it had been born from her own night at the airport. On Wednesday morning, the department director called her into a small meeting room. Ella, we want you to handle the community outreach letters, he said. Our CEO personally requested that someone with empathy lead that part. She blinked in surprise. The CEO requested me? The director nodded. Apparently, he saw something in your application. Later that afternoon, while she was organizing documents, she heard a quiet voice behind her. Miss Moore? She turned, startled. Daniel Reed stood at the doorway, no suit jacket, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. I hope I am not interrupting, he said. Not at all, she managed. Her pulse quickened. He stepped inside, glancing at the papers on her desk. I wanted to thank you again. You may not realize it, But you inspired this campaign. Ella stared at him. I did? He nodded. That night at the airport, you reminded me that kindness still exists. I wanted to create something that could pass that spirit forward. For a moment, she was speechless. That is incredible, she finally said. He smiled gently. Incredible is one word for it. I call it fate. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the busy office faded away. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the silence. I will not keep you, he said softly. But I hope we can continue this conversation sometime off the clock. After he left, Ella sat frozen in her chair, heart racing. She could still hear his words echoing in her head. I call it fate. The following days moved quickly. Daniel stopped by her department more often than necessary, offering feedback or asking about progress. Sometimes he brought coffee for the whole team, but he always set her cup down last, his hand brushing hers in quiet recognition. The office whispered, but Ella pretended not to notice. One evening, as she packed up to leave, she found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for reminding me what real leadership means. Dr. She smiled despite herself. No CEO had ever written her a personal note before. Still, she kept her heart guarded. Men with power often blurred lines they did not intend to cross. But something about him felt different, patient, genuine, almost humble beneath the layers of responsibility. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the glass towers. Ella stepped into the cold evening air and pulled her coat tighter. Somewhere behind her, in a corner office high above, Daniel watched from his window. He saw her look up at the falling snow and tuck her hair behind her ear before walking away. He whispered to himself, I will tell her the truth when the time is right. Neither of them knew that fate was already weaving the next thread of their story. Winter turned to early spring, and the one-ticket-home campaign grew beyond anyone's expectations. Letters poured in from families reunited after months apart. Ella Moore often stayed late, reading the stories aloud to herself as she organized them. Each one reminded her of that single night in the airport, and of the man who had turned her small act of kindness into something that changed hundreds of lives. Daniel Reed visited her department almost every day now. Sometimes it was to discuss progress. Sometimes it was for reasons neither of them mentioned. When he entered the room, conversations paused, and hearts, including Ella's, beat a little faster. One afternoon, he appeared beside her desk with 2 coffee cups. You look like you could use one, he said, handing her the cup with her name written neatly across the sleeve. Thank you, but you really do not have to keep doing this, she replied, smiling. He shrugged lightly. Then consider it my turn to give back. They shared small talk at first, safe topics, work deadlines, weather, city traffic. But over time, the pauses between words grew softer, warmer. He asked about her family. She told him about her mother's recovery, about sketching at the hospital to pass the time. He listened as if every word mattered. One Friday evening, he stopped by her cubicle while most of the office was already empty. The team is going out for dinner to celebrate the campaign results, he said. Would you like to join us? She hesitated. I probably should not. I am still new. He smiled. That is exactly why you should come. The restaurant was quiet and elegant, tucked between glass towers downtown. Candlelight flickered against the window. Daniel was attentive but not overbearing, making sure everyone laughed and felt included. Yet whenever Ella spoke, his focus shifted toward her, subtle but unmistakable. When the dinner ended, he offered to walk her to the train. Snow began to fall again, soft and slow. They stopped beneath the streetlight near the corner. You know, she said, I used to think that night at the airport was just luck. Now I am not so sure. He looked at her, his breath visible in the cold air. I do not believe in luck, he said quietly. I believe in choices that feel like destiny. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The city noise faded, leaving only the whisper of wind and the rhythm of 2 unspoken hearts. Then Ella stepped back slightly, breaking the moment with a nervous laugh. I should go. The train leaves in 5 minutes. I will walk you to the platform, he said gently. They rode the escalator down, their hands brushing once, almost by accident. When the train arrived, she turned to him. Thank you for the coffee, the chance, and everything. Oh, he smiled. You gave me more than you know." As the doors closed, their eyes held for one last second. Ella sat by the window, watching his figure grow smaller until the station disappeared from view. Her heart raced in a way she could not name. Back on the street, Daniel stood in the falling snow, the same question echoing through his mind. When do I tell her who I really am? For now, he decided, not yet. He wanted her to see the man, not the title. He wanted the connection to be real, and deep down, he hoped she felt the same. Spring melted into summer, and the glass walls of Aurelian Group gleamed beneath the bright Sunday the One Ticket Home campaign was declared a national success, featured in magazines and morning news shows. The company prepared for its biggest charity gala yet, a formal event to celebrate the thousands of families who had been reunited. Ella Moore spent her afternoons helping the communications team draft speeches and invitations. She was proud of her work but nervous about attending. It would be her first company gala, and everyone knew the CEO would be there. She tried not to think about how she would face Daniel Reed outside the walls of the office, without deadlines to hide behind. On the evening of the event, she stood before her small mirror, adjusting the simple navy dress she had borrowed from her sister. Her reflection looked uncertain but hopeful. "You are only going as staff," she told herself, "so breathe." Oh. The ballroom was breathtaking, chandeliers sparkling like stars, tables lined with silver and crystal. The hum of conversation filled the air. Ella moved through the crowd with a clipboard, checking guest lists and microphone setups. When the lights dimmed and the spotlight hit the stage, her eyes followed instinctively. There he was, Daniel Reed, confident, poised, yet warmer than any corporate leader she had ever seen. The host introduced him. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Aurelian Group, Mr. Daniel Reed." The sound of applause washed over the room. Ella froze, her breath catching in her throat. CEO. The word echoed again and again. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. The man she had met at the airport, the man who brought her coffee, who walked her to the train, who listened as if she mattered, was the head of the entire company. He stepped up to the microphone, his deep voice steady. This campaign began with a simple act of kindness. A stranger gave up her ticket so a father and his daughter could go home for Christmas. She reminded me, and all of us, that humanity still exists in the smallest moments. People applauded again. Ella's heartbeat thundered in her ears. He looked out over the crowd, his gaze moving slowly until it found hers. For a moment, their eyes met. The air between them felt heavy, filled with everything unsaid. After the speech, she slipped out into the hallway, needing air. The sound of music and laughter faded behind her. Her chest felt tight, confusion mixing with betrayal. Why had he not told her? Footsteps echoed softly. "Ella," his voice called. She turned to see him standing there, no spotlight now, only the quiet glow from the chandeliers behind the glass doors. "You knew," she said, her voice trembling. "You knew I had no idea who you were." He nodded slowly. "I did. Then why keep it a secret? I wanted to know if you would still talk to me without the name, without the title. I wanted something real." She shook her head, fighting the sting in her eyes. "You lied by omission, Daniel. You let me believe we were equals." He took a step closer. "We are equals, Ella. At least, that is how I have always seen you." She stepped back. "You could have told me the truth." "Oh, I know," he whispered. "And I am sorry." Silence stretched between them. Somewhere inside, a violin began to play, soft and slow. Ella turned away, her voice breaking. "I cannot do this." She walked down the hallway, leaving him standing alone beneath the glittering light. In that moment, the success of the campaign, the applause, the titles, all of it meant nothing. What hurt most was not who he was, but that he had hidden it. And as she stepped outside into the warm night, one thought echoed in her heart. Maybe some mistakes are not fated at all, they are choices. The next morning, Ella Moore walked into the office with her head held high but her heart heavy. Whispers followed her down the hallway. Someone had leaked photos from the gala the moment when Daniel Reed's eyes had found hers under the lights. Headlines on business blogs twisted the story. CEO's secret affair with junior employee. By noon, her inbox flooded with questions she could not answer. The human resources manager called her in gently but firmly. "Ella, this is not your fault," he said, "but it is better if you take a few days off until things settle down." She nodded, her throat tight. When she stepped out of the building, the summer air felt too bright, too sharp. She sat on a bench near the plaza, watching people hurry past, their lives untouched by the chaos that had suddenly become hers. Her phone buzzed again, another headline, another cruel comment. She turned it off and shoved it into her bag. For the first time, she wondered if her kindness that night at the airport had been a mistake. Across the city, Daniel sat in his corner office, staring at the same news. His assistant had tried to control the narrative, but the damage was done. Investors called, the board demanded statements. He said little, his jaw tight. Finally, he stood and said, "I will handle it myself." All that evening, he drove to the small apartment building where Ella lived. She opened the door slowly, surprised but not shocked. Her eyes were tired. "Why are you here, Daniel?" "To tell you I am sorry again. This is not what I wanted." She crossed her arms, trying to steady her voice. "You should not be here. The cameras will love this." "I do not care about cameras," he said softly. "I care about you." Her defenses cracked for a moment, then she looked away. "You had your world, Daniel. I just wanted a place to belong in mine." He took a breath. "Then let me help you fix this." But she shook her head. "You cannot fix trust once it is broken." He said nothing. The silence between them felt final. When he left, she closed the door gently behind him, leaning her forehead against the wood. Inside that quiet apartment, the hum of the city faded. All that remained was the echo of what could have been, and the ache of a heart that still believed in something honest, even when it hurt. 2 weeks passed. The headlines faded, replaced by newer scandals and fresher gossip. But the ache inside Ella Moore did not disappear. She spent her days helping her mother at home, sketching in quiet corners, avoiding the world that had once made her feel alive. Sometimes she turned on the television only to hear Daniel Reed's name mentioned during business reports, and she quickly changed the channel. The sight of him still hurt too much. One afternoon, while buying groceries for her mother, she noticed a flyer posted near the community board. It announced a new foundation event hosted by Aurelian Group. The title caught her attention, "Hope You Make It Home," a celebration of everyday kindness. It would take place at the same airport where everything had begun. She stared at the flyer for a long time. Her first instinct was to walk away. But something inside her whispered that maybe it was time to stop running. On the day of the event, the airport was transformed. Banners fluttered above the check-in counters. Musicians played soft acoustic songs. Families reunited, hugging and laughing beneath strings of warm lights. Ella blended quietly into the crowd, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She told herself she was only there to see the project's impact, not the man behind it. When the announcement began, Daniel stepped onto the small stage. He looked different, calmer, humbler, dressed in a simple shirt instead of a tailored suit. His voice carried through the speakers, deep and sincere. "This event is about the moments that remind us who we are," he said. "A few months ago, I met someone who taught me that leadership is not about power, but about compassion." She gave up her seat on a flight so that a stranger and his daughter could go home. She expected nothing in return, and yet her kindness became the reason we are all gathered here tonight. The crowd erupted in applause. Ella's heart pounded. She wanted to disappear, and yet she could not look away. Daniel lifted a small envelope from the podium. That night, I kept her ticket as a reminder. On it, she wrote 4 simple words. "Hope you make it home." Those words carried me through the hardest weeks of my life. Today, I want to return them to the person who gave them meaning. The audience murmured. Daniel stepped down from the stage, walking slowly through the crowd until he stopped in front of her. For a moment, everything fell silent. "Ella Moore," he said softly, "you taught me that kindness is not weakness, it is courage. And I am sorry for breaking your trust. I should have told you the truth sooner." Her eyes filled with tears. She could barely speak. "Daniel, why are you doing this?" "Because you deserve to be seen for who you are," he said, "and because every story deserves an honest ending." He handed her the same boarding pass she had given him months ago. Her handwriting was still faint, but visible. Around them, people began to clap, moved by the scene they did not fully understand. Ella looked at the ticket, then back at him. "You really kept it?" "Every day," he said quietly. "It reminded me that good people still exist." The noise of the airport returned laughter, applause, the sound of announcements echoing from the speakers. In that moment, the walls she had built began to crack, not from pressure, but from light. She held the ticket close to her chest, whispering the same words she had written long ago. "Hope you make it home." Daniel smiled, eyes glistening. "I just did." Applause still echoed across the terminal, but Ella Moore barely heard it. The noise blurred into a soft hum as she stood there, the old boarding pass trembling in her hands. Daniel Reed waited quietly, not rushing her, not explaining further. His silence said more than any speech could. She looked around at the families hugging, the children laughing, the banners that read, "Hope you make it home." All of this, every smile, every reunion, had started with a single choice on a cold night. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, she felt peace instead of regret. Daniel took a step closer. "I know I cannot erase the mistakes I made," he said gently, "but I want to build something better with honesty this time. Not as a CEO, not as a story in the news, but as a man who finally learned what matters." Ella met his eyes, her tears falling freely now. "And what is that?" He smiled faintly. "Love that does not need status to be real." The crowd around them began to fade as a soft melody filled the hall. Someone handed Daniel a microphone, but he did not return to the stage. Instead, he spoke right there beside her. "Everyone here tonight reminds me that kindness travels farther than we ever imagine. I was the man who received a stranger's gift, and I nearly lost my chance to give something back. But sometimes, the universe gives us a second flight." He turned to her, lowering his voice. "Ella Moore, will you take that flight with me?" Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by a gentle hush. Ella blinked through her tears, half laughing, half crying. "You are asking me to?" "Yes," he said softly. "To believe again." She looked down at the boarding pass, still resting in her palm. The ink was faded, but the message remained. "Hope you make it home." She closed her fingers around it and nodded. "Then let us go home together." The audience erupted into cheers. Someone released a handful of paper confetti that drifted through the air like tiny snowflakes. Daniel took her hand as cameras flashed around them, but for once, none of it mattered. The noise, the crowd, the attention, all blurred into a single, quiet moment of truth. Later that evening, after the event ended, they walked through the nearly empty terminal. The lights reflected off the polished floor, and their joined hands swung gently between them. "Do you ever think about that night?" Ella asked softly. "Every day," Daniel replied. "It was the best mistake I ever made." She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. Outside, planes lifted one by one into the twilight sky. Their engines roared, fading into the distance like promises carried on the wind. As they reached the exit, Ella stopped and turned to him. "Do you still have my ticket?" He held it up, folded neatly inside his wallet. "I kept it close, just in case I needed a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "That the simplest act of kindness can change an entire life," he said. They stepped into the night together, the warm glow of the terminal lights shining behind them. Above, a plane soared through the clouds, its wings catching the last shimmer of sunset. In that moment, neither of them were strangers, or CEO, or employee. They were just two people who had found their way back home, proof that even a single act of goodness can rewrite destiny. And as the camera of the heart faded to black, one voice lingered in the air like a whisper carried by the wind. "Every journey begins with one kind act.